All right, my name and who I am doesn't really matter. I know you, you know me, and that's all that matters. I don't really think an introduction is really all appropriate considering the subject of what we're going to be talking about. In my opinion, um, if you're paying attention to what someone's saying because of who they are, you're missing an opportunity to hear something or hearing what the person's actually saying. The message is what needs to be focused on rather than who's saying it. So that's my point of view on it. So I don't feel like plugging who I am or what I'm about or anything like that is really all that important. I feel like it's just a good idea to have a conversation about casual topics not casual topics, about serious topics as everyday people because everyone has a right to an opinion. And just because we're not a professor of Judaism relations in the 21st century or the 20th century doesn't mean that you don't have a right to an opinion or a right to talk about things and come to an understanding.
There was a statement saying that the point of the attack was to disengage an Hamas rocket on the southern Israel and arms smuggling into Gaza.
Okay.
I want to know, how do you feel about the initial start behind everything that's going on now?
Are you talking about so in regards to now, because you did say now, are we talking about how like that incident from 2008 ties into now, or are you talking about like we still focus on 2008?
Just focusing on 2008.
Okay, so in 2008, honestly, man, I'm as a layman, I probably know about as much as your average, a little more than your average person in America, considering you got your various types who just don't pay attention to it until they feel like it matters to them. But I think I can hit a couple at once. I feel the same way about 2008 as I do about other latter events that happened, such as other incidences in 2012, 2014. I think they even had one to 2021, if I remember correctly. We have a lot of our own problems, so focus on that too. But when you live let's give you an example here. And this doesn't condone all sorts of responses, but this is a general response. You live next to your neighbor, right? And let's say you have 3 feet on the side of their house and 3 feet on the side of your house, and this property lines in the middle. So you have 6 feet between your houses, right? Not a bunch of space, but more than enough to where two families should be able to agree on respecting each other's space, right? Does that sound like an appropriate situation? Okay. Now, you live in your house and you take care of it, and regardless of what your beliefs are, your color, anything else like that, take all that out of it, and we're going to focus on actions. Now, you take care of your house and you do things a little bit differently. You have proceed down your path. And these people do things a little bit differently and proceed down their path. And for the most part, you're all worried about bettering your property. But occasionally, your neighbor likes to chuck rocks at your house. Whether it's just damaging your windows, your property, the intent behind it, or anything else like that, it starts to get fucking annoying. Now, I'm going to ask you, how many times are you going to let people throw rocks at your house before you start throwing rocks back?
Probably once.
Okay, so are you familiar with the Iron Dome? What the Iron Dome is for
No.
Israel? Okay, it's a multi-layered missile defense system. Uses various weapons that we actually supply them with quite a bit. And they have it because they are consistently surrounded by people that want to kill them. And whether it's a understandable belief, whether there's justifiability between their intent behind it, whatever it is. The point is that these people are still in an existential crisis. It's not just some asshole throwing rocks at them. It is people throwing missiles at them and their people anytime someone does something to upset these people. Now, you can argue about people in charge, everything else like that. It's a very complex situation, but like if we just kind of break it down to layman terms, again, in 2008, you had a situation to where Hamas, who's funded by Iran, who wants to see Israel wiped off the face of the map, and you could look at their Ayatollah and see them saying these things. And so when you find out that that neighbor is not just throwing rocks at you just to annoy you or just be an asshole, they're literally trying to hurt you or damage you in some sort of way, you're probably going to hit them pretty hard, and you're probably going to throw enough rocks at them to where they don't fucking throw rocks at you anymore, or you're going to try to prevent them from doing it. That is a lot of how I see, or the how I paint the view of it for Israel and Hamas. Again, I'm specifying Hamas for that, um, and it's very complex. But again, at the very baseline of it is you have people who were consistently trying to hurt your people. There needs to be a response. You can't just live with that. You're either going to move, right? Try to get them to move, or just get them to stop. But you can't just move. You don't have nowhere to go. You are a people that were displaced and routinely massacred for centuries. You have nowhere to go for your people. So this is an existential crisis. You can't just pick up and leave. You can't just move. So you have to deal with the asshole throwing your rocks and throwing those rocks. And that's what I see is happening in 2008, 12, 14, and 21, as well as other minor things that aren't even listed as an actual conflict. There's thousands of rockets that have been fired.
So far throughout the war, this is an exact number. There's a estimation of this. There's been about 35,000 deaths. Obviously, there's more, I'm sure. Those are the recorded numbers.
All right.
The solutions to the war is what I want to speak on. It's very widespread, and of course, it's an opinionated topic. Everyone has their own feelings on it. But I want to know what yours is. The one that I found most revealing was the creation of Palestine and the West Bank.
Two-state solution.
Two-state solution.
You'd actually find quite a number of Israeli citizens in Israel who will support a two-state solution. You find a bunch of Jewish Americans, probably Israeli Americans too, but Jewish Americans, Jon Stewart, Bernie Sanders, I don't know if they're religiously practicing, but I do believe they are ethnic Jews, who support a two-state solution. In fact, it was always part of the plan, even with U.S. and more hardliners have kind of pushed away from it, but like it's always been part of the plan that there's supposed to be a two-state solution. However, what you get is, you've ever heard the saying, power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. Israel got a lot of support and funding from the U.S., other European nations, who collectively were very advanced at the time or further along in the Industrial Revolution from previous centuries. So it made it very easy for them to get Israel put up on a upper leg, so to speak, compared to the other nations around them. But I'm sorry. What was the solution? Yeah, solution is a two-state solution because these people already lived here. And while there can be arguments about who the land actually belongs to, it actually goes back and forth. If you go back hundreds, thousands of years, Jewish people pushed off their lands, people pushed Jewish people off those lands. It is a very back and forth. Boundaries change. People are conquered. People assimilate or they learn to live together. And this is one of those situations too where I feel like there is an unfair bias, but it's a complicated situation to where sometimes a bias is understandable. Palestinians today have a very good cause to be upset with Jewish settlers. And something could be said about, oh, well, how many Palestinians were displaced by the creation of a Jewish state? Very true, but again, if we're going to do the whole let's go back in history thing, then you got to go back in time to find out when people were pushing Jewish people off these lands and other ethnic or religious conflicts, so forth and so on. So again, it's a very complicated history that cannot be justified by one synopsis or another. Just because you have a point that is a very strong point, but is pretty much hole punched out of a textbook, isn't going to fix the problem. And there needs to be more than just a two-state solution. It's not just a two-state solution. It needs to be a process to where, as part of the two-state solution, other Arabic nations around have to recognize Israel as a legitimate state. And that's a conversation that gets lost when people talk about a two-state solution. Because I am all for a two-state solution, and quite frankly, I used to be very mad at Israel and Netanyahu or Bibi for doing things to actively work against a two-state solution and empowering Hamas for those reasons. But there needs to be, back to what I was saying, is people around those other Arabic nations, a lot of them don't recognize Israel as a nation. Which means that the same thing that people are complaining about Israel not recognizing Palestine as its own nation is something that's already been happening since 1948 with Arabic nations around. In fact, they've already had a fight multiple times, multiple nations, to just simply exist.